Like
91 enemies. I'm not sure what I was expecting.
Okay.
Kitty's got it. Kitty's
yeah,
got it. We're good. We got the cat.
This is deployment. Oh my god.
This is about what I expect. This feels like an 8 stage kind of right now, honestly.
This is a stage of all time.
And 3, it should look like this. Alright, he's
yeah.
on.
There he is.
You know he's next.
Oh!
Really?
He's slow. Oh, these are slow enemies. Here he is!
Oh, there he is! He is!
Alright.
Oh boy!
Okay, I'm gonna translate. Let's see what his name is.
Bye.
Arknights' 5th integrated strategies is here. This IS seeks to build upon several mechanics established in previous ISs, as well as bring a wealth of new maps, mechanics, challenges, and up to 5 endings. Today, I'm going to seek to explain what IS5 is all about, go over the mechanics, the new enemies, and some of the endings. Without further ado, this is an all-inclusive guide to everything IS5. Strap yourselves in, and we have a lot to talk about today. Just to let you know, this only goes over the base stuff that releases with IS5. We won't be talking about the DLCs. That'll come later. So, let's go into the main overhauls and updates to IS5. The first big update for newbies is the change to the approach with Ascensions. In IS4, Ascension 0 gave a minus 40% score penalty, regardless if the run was a success or not, upping it to 20% on A1, and then finally 0% on A2. In IS5, this is changed to be 0% bonus at A0, just like IS3. What is similar to IS4 is how Ascensions 3, 6, and 9 give additional passives and upgrade some relics to a stronger variant. Now, let's talk about the first big mechanic, Thoughts. Firstly, there's Thoughts, which replace full autos from IS4. There are 3 types, Relic Thoughts, Combat Thoughts, and Conception Thoughts, colloquially known as Key Thoughts or, just keys. Relic Thoughts are specifically used at the Idea Filter node. Combat nodes can be used for a combat stage, max of 1 active at a time, and give shield to the Idea Filter. And Keys are a multi-purpose resource for vertical climbs, refreshing nodes, and give hope at the Idea Filter. You can also use keys to buy passives for the Safe House, Shop, and Idea Filter itself. You can buy up to 5 permabuffs, such as the Shop giving a free reroll. It's important to note that these passives aren't tied to the out-of-the-game passives you unlock, but they serve the same function. Thoughts have 3 statistics. There's Star Rarity for 1, which is only important at the Idea Filter. A combination of 2 thoughts dictates what rewards you get based on type and rarity. So, combine 2 thoughts with a rarity of less than 3 to get a basic reward. Combinations between 4 and 5 give a medium reward, and 6 plus give a high tier reward. You sometimes can get a jackpot and obtain a relic from the highest tier of collectibles, but only for relics. No Thor shields or 4 hope from this. You can also get a critical failure and only get a shitty high weight thought. Instead, that has no special effects and should be turned into a collectible or thrown out ASAP. A thought also features their name and icon. Unlike full autos in IS4, these aren't split between up and down versions. And lastly is their weight. Weight contributes to mental burden, an analogous 1-to-1 ratio of 1 weight per 1 mental burden. We'll get more into that later. You can obtain Relic and Combat Thoughts randomly as reward drops from battles or specific encounters. You can get Relic and Combat Thoughts very easily from nodes, unlike Glyphs in IS4. It's very easy to rack up a bunch. As for keys, the primary way to obtain more of them is to destroy the Spine of Ages, also known as a spine, thorn, or just a tree. They have bulky stats, but killing one grants the player a key, so it's highly encouraged to use arts and true damage to take them out. Next are the changes to nodes, new nodes, and mechanical changes to node progression. The biggest new node is the Idea Filter, featured on floors 2 and onward. This is a node where you'll dump all of your Relic and Combat Thoughts into for rewards. It's highly recommended to not get hope from combining keys unless you're literally drowning in them. Combining 2 of the same thought type guarantees that type of reward. Mixed types give literally mixed results. Next is the Face-Off node. These nodes let you battle 1 to 2 enemies with 1 to 2 units respectively. There are 3 tiers, but you don't need to pick the hardest fight as the reward differences are barely different. Just do the easy fights for easy rewards. You don't lose lives for failing in these nodes, but leaking any enemy results in you losing the node and not getting any rewards. But you can at least reroll the enemy set once if you're unhappy with it. Boss keys also got slightly changed. Firstly, boss keys require 2 keys to enter, and entering one gives a relic that buffs and debuffs you and the enemies. For example, 1 boss key relic gives you plus 50 initial DP and half DP gen. For every boss key you enter, the boss key relics from prior boss keys will add onto the new ones. As well, Ending 3 requires you enter a boss key that forces you to take a boss key relic. In Expansion 2, there are relics that give class buffs depending on how many boss key relics you hold. To move vertically in IS5, you need 2 keys per vertical movement. You can do this as much as you want as long as there's a vertical path and you got 2 keys. Now, for the big mechanical overhaul, re-rolling nodes. In IS5, you can re-roll a node you don't like with a key. This can only be done one time per node. There's a squad that gives one free reroll and a relic that lets you reroll one more time, but still costs one key, so be wary of that. Re-rolling nodes let you do insane shit, primarily reroll a bunch of nodes into combat nodes and get more rewards. There's also an early encounter that lets you pick between one of 3 relics that gives you a higher chance on re-rolling to get a specific desired node type. There's one for non-combat, one for emergency, and one for wish-fulfilled nodes respectively. However, the wish-fulfilled one is exclusive to DLC 1 and onward. You can have one of these relics per run, and each have their benefits. For example, the pacifist and combat reroll relics obviously give the benefit of higher rerolls for their specified nodes, but also on certain encounters you get extra rewards for having that relic on you. Like here, in this encounter, you can show the pacifist relic for a secret HR voucher or the combat relic for the Keatonist Ripper. Now, let's talk about a big change to floor debuffs that come in the form of eras. Eras are a debuff that can appear randomly and only a maximum of 1 can be active at a time. They come in 3 levels. From A0 to A5, they are Tier 1 or the formative phase. At A6 to A11, they are upgraded to Tier 2, the expansive phase. And at A12 to A18, they are upgraded to Tier 3 or the flourishing phase. There are 9 eras in IS5, and unlike IS4, there are no secret eras to unlock. Some eras are fine, they don't affect your run too bad, such as Era of Commerce or Era of Sarcasm. Meanwhile, others like Era of Suffering or Congestion make me want to genuinely find Highmount and shove them into a fucking locker. The only secret era is locked behind a floor 4 encounter, where you pay 2 keys to do floor 4 again, but as a boss key that can spawn Image Corruption as an era. It's not that hard to obtain. Eras start at a maximum of 5 nodes, so if you cross 5 nodes, the era ends. Eras can be extended by leaking a Labyrinth Caster or Terracast afflicted enemies. This can stack without limit, by the way, and can get pretty bad. And to quickly preface, Terracast enemies are enemies with a red sun mark over their heads. Leaking them extends your era, but won't create an era if you don't already have one. Killing that enemy spawns a Terracast in their place, and they erect a 3x3 Necrosis DOT on spawn. This ability can't be silenced. Despite looking like a Reborns, the Terracast do not have the 90% DR mechanic. And the last major addition is discussing Thought Burden. Throughout your IS5 runs, you will have to combat enemies as well as your supposed big brain you keep telling everyone you have. Thoughts have weight to them, and that 1-to-1 ratio applies here. You start off with a total of 7 burden. The first 4 burden are in the green, 5 through 6 puts you in the yellow, and 7 puts you in the red. The red threshold is always 1.5 times the yellow threshold number, so some simple math can be applied here. You increase your burden by leveling up, getting relics to increase burden, or putting 3 operators to carry burden. Thankfully in IS5 there is no downside to having operators carry burden in those 3 slots, so just put your strongest ops in there. At A0, E2 ops can contribute 6 burden. Tin Man is the only exception, who at E2 can hold a whopping 16 burden. Now, there are some downsides to being in the yellow. For all ascensions, being in the yellow makes the player lose 1 HP when crossing nodes, vertical nodes too. And the first 3 ending bosses have additional effects if you go into their fights in the yellow. There's always an idea filter node before the boss, as well as the fact you can just throw away thoughts at your own leisure, so there should be no reason you ever go into the yellow during a final boss fight in IS5. Anyways, the debuffs stack depending on what ascension you're on. For A0 to A4, you just lose 1 HP for every node you cross. For A5 through A10, your ops have plus 2 DP cost. For A11 through A17, your ops have plus 3 cost instead of plus 2. And at A18, it makes your operators having minus 20% attack debuff, and you get inflicted with DP gen minus 20%. Now, for the stages you'll encounter pretty much a fuck ton of spines throughout your run, so bringing operators dedicated to that fare is a must. Medic Amiya is the best, most accessible choice thanks to her welfare status, and S2 is pretty quick to charge. Other options can include high burst damage units such as Kazemaru, anything like Ashlock for long range, something like Click who does arts damage and stun, as well as other units like Indigo who also do high burst damage. I don't think I need to tell you that everyone's favorite Sarkaz unit is also really decent here, and her 5-star friend too. Other important operators to include can range from any good 4-star, since 4-stars don't cost hope this IS, and Tin Man is an excellent burden holder, alongside just being really decent. All of the maps pre-expansion are quite easy this time around. Enemies wait for a longer time in their spots, and this IS has a decent balance of trash mobs with a mix of harder elites sprinkled in. Maps are a generally slower affair outside of some emergencies, and you can pretty comfortably combat all stages with Walter, although I personally recommend players experiment without her, as this IS is pretty easy to play with. Now, let's talk about the first 3 ending bosses. Skip to this timestamp if you don't want to be spoiled. In this IS, Fremont is the main ending 1 boss. His stage has some 30 initial spawns, but they wait a long time, so you want to capitalize on this with global range or long range ops. Fremon himself has a mechanic where, when alive, makes all retreated or killed operators spawn a coffin in their place. They can't begin their half redeploy time until the coffin is destroyed, so daisy chain your ops or use Tin Man. For Phase 2, he does a one-time fuckery move where he randomly teleports all deployed operators and randomly teleports them to different tiles and randomly changes their direction. This is actually especially annoying if you have one of the shoe relics. This fight is something you don't really get in the first try without some pure luck, but it's certainly not too bad once you know how to do it. Fremon also does Necrosis in Phase 2, but just keep a medic and a defender handy, you'll be okay. Fremon's also a Mystic caster, so bait his nuke out with a fast redeploy or a Doll Keeper. Ambushers and Crushers work too, but I wouldn't bank on it for its RNG / stats and high ascension, just don't test them. For the Twin Kings, Teresis and Teresia, it is a pretty difficult fight even on repeat visits. The main thing boils down to shifting Teresis away from Teresia in both phases to lower his DR to make him actually killable. In Phase 1, the projections will also prove extremely tough without Yato Altar or Wishadel, you just need to be careful honestly. When in Phase 2, they start summoning a bunch of enemies, so make sure to kill them ASAP before they kill you with their big AoE attack. They do a max power AoE attack when killed, so make sure you have a couple units handy to finish up the fight. Lastly, there's Gun Knight Patriot, who is arguably the easiest so long as you're not intimidated by Phase 2, and is Jesus Gun Rain! Which is actually isn't that deadly. And just be mindful of the mortars, automata, and gates that eat 2 units for free. Gun Knight Patriot himself just requires a good blocker to stall it, and you're golden! Glow. The main thing about the first 3 endings is that they're not really that hard. Excluding A15 shenanigans, which requires a modicum of thought, none of the endings provide any significant challenge, and all of them are cheese with just a couple of specific units or group picks. Well, that's all for today. Stay breezy, everybody, and good luck on this IS. I highly recommend breaking it in half without Wishadel.